Every day, more than 800 million people around the world struggle with hunger. That's nearly 1 in 10 people living without enough food to nourish their bodies, trapped in cycles of poverty and food insecurity. It's a global tragedy that we all know exists, yet many believe it's a solvable problem. So, what if we just printed more money and distributed it to those in need? Seems like a simple fix, right? Give people money and hunger disappears. Or does it? This is where things start to get complicated. On the surface, it makes sense. More money equals more food. What if I told you that this idea is not only wrong, but could actually make things worse? Why can't we just create wealth out of thin air? These are important questions that deserve to be explored. Stick around to find out why that is and what we should do instead. Let's break it down. The inflation disaster. What happens when a country actually tries printing unlimited money? History has already answered this question, and it wasn't pretty. Example 1, Zimbabwe hyperinflation nightmare. In the early 2000s, Zimbabwe's government started printing excessive amounts of money to deal with economic problems. The result? Prices spiraled out of control. A simple loaf of bread, which once cost a few dollars, suddenly cost billions. Yes, billions. People had to carry stacks or even wheelbarrows full of cash just to buy groceries. Example 2, Weimar Germany, economic collapse. After World War I, Germany tried printing more money to pay off war debts, but instead of fixing the economy, it led to one of the worst cases of hyperinflation in history. Prices doubled every few days. Workers were paid twice a day just so they could rush to buy food before prices went up again. Money became so worthless that people burned stacks of it for heat because firewood was more valuable. The lesson: when governments print excessive money without economic growth, inflation gets out of control. Prices skyrocket, savings become worthless, and the economy collapses. Instead of solving hunger, printing more money actually makes things worse, because food and resources become even harder to afford. So if printing money isn't the solution, then what is? Stick around, because next, we'll dive into the real reasons behind world hunger and how we can actually fix it. Understanding the basics of money and economy. Let's simplify something many of us take for granted: money. At its core, money is just a tool. It holds value because we all agree it does. Whether it's cash, coins, or digital currency, we trust that money represents something valuable and can be used to trade for goods and services. Governments control this process by printing money when necessary to keep things running smoothly. But here's the catch: money doesn't hold value simply because it exists. It holds value because there is something real behind it. Now, let's talk about what happens when we print too much of it. If the government starts printing billions of dollars out of nowhere and hands it out to everyone, you might think that would solve hunger. But the reality is, it doesn't work that way. When you print more money without increasing the amount of goods and services in the economy, the value of that money starts to shrink. This is called inflation. Imagine this. Let's say everyone in your town gets $1 million overnight. Sounds great, right? You'd have a lot of money. But here's the problem. If everyone suddenly has more money, the demand for goods, like food, goes up. But if the supply of food remains the same, the prices will increase to match the demand. That means the extra money people now have doesn't make them any richer, just makes the cost of living higher. Your $1 million won't go as far as you think. And things like food will cost more than ever. Now, let's bring this back to the hunger problem. If we printed billions of dollars and gave it to people who are hungry, it wouldn't solve the problem. Sure, they'd have more money, but the cost of food would rise just as quickly. The rich would still stay rich, and the poor would see no real change. In fact, the situation might even get worse. Inflation would make life more expensive for everyone, and the underlying issue of food scarcity wouldn't be solved. The real causes of world hunger? If printing money doesn't work, what's really causing world hunger? Many people think world hunger exists because there isn't enough money to buy food. But the truth is, it's not a lack of money. It's a lack of resources, infrastructure, and fair distribution. Printing more money wouldn't solve the problem because the real issues run much deeper. Let's break them down. Food shortages. Some regions simply don't produce enough food. Climate conditions, poor farming techniques, and lack of access to modern agricultural tools mean that millions of people rely on imported food, which can be expensive and unreliable. Corruption. In many cases, food aid and financial assistance never reach the people who need it most. Governments and organizations sometimes mismanage funds or even steal food supplies, leaving vulnerable populations to suffer. War and conflict. When war breaks out, farming stops, supply chains are destroyed, and entire populations are displaced. Without a stable environment, growing and distributing food becomes nearly impossible. Infrastructure problems. Even when food is available, poor roads, lack of refrigeration, and inefficient transportation systems prevent it from reaching those in need. This is a massive issue in regions like Africa, which is some of the most fertile land in the world, but still suffers from food shortages due to political instability and lack of investment in infrastructure. Real-life example. Take Africa, for example. Some of the world's richest, most fertile land exists there, yet hunger is still widespread. Why? Because wars, corruption, and poor infrastructure prevent food from being produced, stored, and transported properly. The issue isn't a lack of food, it's that people can't get to it. So if world hunger isn't just about money, why don't governments just print money to fix these problems? Well, they actually do print money, but they have to be very careful about how they do it. While governments can technically print as much money as they want, they don't because of one major problem: inflation. This is why we have central banks like the Federal Reserve in the US or the European Central Bank, which manage how much money is in circulation. Their job is to keep inflation under control by adjusting the money supply and interest rates. If they print too much too fast, people lose trust in the currency. When inflation gets out of control, people start looking for alternatives like gold, cryptocurrency, or more stable foreign currencies. If printing money solved everything, we'd all be millionaires, but instead it would make money meaningless. This is why smart governments focus on economic growth instead of just printing money. They invest in businesses, infrastructure, and technology to create real value instead of just flooding the market with cash. What's the real solution to world hunger? So if printing money isn't the answer, what is? Investing in agriculture, better farming techniques, modern irrigation, and improved technology can boost food production and reduce shortages. Fixing food distribution, governments and organizations must improve roads, storage facilities, and supply chains so food can reach the people who need it most. Reducing corruption, ensuring that aid and resources reach the hungry instead of being lost to inefficiency or theft. Economic growth. Instead of handing out money, we need to create jobs and sustainable ways for people to afford food on their own. Now that you know why printing money isn't the answer, what do you think is the biggest barrier to ending world hunger? Well, let's talk in the comments.